Hey everyone, so in this episode of Make It with Calvin, I'm going to talk about why I made these awesome brass Ultimaker hot end parts for Dustin, aka the Jatmn, and talk about why brass might not have been our best option in the long run, but hey, that's what experimenting is all about, right? So this whole project pretty much got started because Dustin, aka the Jatmn, asked me, hey, I know I can go onto AliExpress or eBay and pick up cheap knockoff Ultimaker hot end parts, but I was wondering, would it be possible for you to make some in brass, as I want to compare it to aluminum, which the original ones I made from? And I said, sure, why not? I've got brass, I got a CNC machine. This sounds like a fun project. Now, when I said in the intro that brass might not have been the best option, only reason why I say that is the thermal conductivity of brass is actually lower than that of aluminum, which is lower than that of copper, which effectively for common materials has the highest thermal conductivity. That said, I think these will work, and if they don't, I can always just make them up a pair in aluminum. So I was able to download the files off GitHub from the Ultimaker GitHub repository, if you will, which was really handy. So with those files, I was able to jump into Fusion 360 and do some basic programming on the parts. It was a relatively simple two-sided operation to get the main bodies done. The way it worked was I had the raw stock sitting like this, and all the top operations, which would be drilling all the holes, milling all the holes, cutting the profile, everything like that was done in the first operation. So everything on that side is relative to itself in terms of accuracy within the constraints of my machine. Then when that side was done, the part was flipped over and the back was faced off. That's the relatively easy part. Now the trickier part is all these had what are called side ops. So they went from a simple two operation part where I just cut it out and cut it to thickness. Then I had to add in things such as side holes or end holes, and that is a little bit trickier, especially on my mill, which does not have the world's highest accuracy. I'm lucky if I can hold 5,000ths accuracy on the thing, generally speaking. But to pull them off, I was very careful to make sure that I kept my zero locations constant, even though the parts had been flipped. So if it was in this orientation, this edge was 0, the part got flipped, this edge became the 0, and then the distance from one side out also stayed the same. That's really critical when you're doing multi-operation parts, to keep everything accurate to a common location, so that way if anything is out of tolerance, at least everything is a mirror of its other side. Now when it came to the heatsink block, this definitely required some special thinking. Now this one has actually been designed so that the fins are actually taller than the stock one. The reason being is I figured a little more surface area was probably not a bad thing for flowing air through for cooling. Now to pull off those deep slots without breaking a tool, what I ended up doing was pre-drilling the entry locations for the tool, for the end mill, on both the top and the bottom. So that way when the end mill came down, it was shaving maybe like 1 or 2 thousandths off the side, because I could only find a drill bit that was so close to what my end mill was. Then the end mill came down, cut across, came down, cut across, came down, cut across, came down, and cut across. Very simple method, and I know the slots are probably not the most accurate, but this is a heatsink part, so it's not crazy critical that they are perfect. That's how I went about pulling off that part. Of them all, this one definitely had to be the trickiest and the most nerve-wracking, just because cutting all the fin slots took about, I believe, 30 to 40 minutes per part, and that takes a while. All the other ones were 10, maybe 12 minutes tops to pull them off, and side ops were very fast. Now for all the parts, I decided to do what's called roll forming for the threads. This is different from cut tapping, where a cut tap literally just physically cuts the threads into the material. Roll forming literally smashes the threads in there. So while it's a little bit more difficult to pull off, as you need to get your drill sizes correct, it tends to make stronger threads in the long run, and especially for a part like this where very, very little threaded material is present and the rest of it's partly threaded, I wanted something that was going to be as strong as possible, so that way if the parts got torqued down, they were going to be a little bit less likely to strip out. That said, you don't want to go torquing down on these parts very hard. The threads are only so strong. When all was said and done with the machining side, I threw the parts into my rock tumbler, which has stainless steel pin media that I've talked about in numerous polishing videos in the past. I ran that for about a day. Any really nasty burrs were filed off before they went into the tumbler, but I found that the tumbler does a decent job of rounding over any sharp edges that are on there and also gives the parts a nice shiny finish. When they were done in there, they got thrown into my massive tumbler with corncob and walnut media, which gave the parts a final finish as well as a nice coating of new finish, so hopefully they won't tarnish too quickly. Obviously, where you live, the amount of salt in the air, the amount of contact they receive, etc., plays a role in how fast brass will tarnish, and it's just an eventual fact of having brass items. But at the same time, a little bit of polishing here and there, if you so desire, helps keep the brass shiny. So I hope you guys found this video interesting. I am definitely curious to see what Dustin thinks of the parts when he gets them, and also curious to see how well they work on his machine, being that they are made in brass, which, like I've said, is not as good at heat transfer as aluminum or ideally copper, but you never know. I mean, sometimes crazy ideas just end up working. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you here next time on Make It with Calvin.